Most Ork warlords dream of conquering a planet. Ghazghkull Thraka dreams of uniting every orc in the galaxy. To the Imperium, he is the Beast of Armageddon, a warlord whose name has become inseparable from planetary invasions, shattered armies, and Waaaghs large enough to threaten entire sectors. To the Orcs, he is something far more dangerous, the prophet of Gork and Mork, chosen to begin the greatest war their species has ever seen. Ghazghkull did not rise because he was simply the largest orc alive. He rose because he understood something many human commanders refused to believe. Orcs could be organized. He gathered rival tribes, crushed war bosses who challenged him, and turned endless greenskin violence toward a single purpose. Under his command, crude mobs became coordinated invasion forces. Mech boys built fleets, teleportation machines, artillery, and war engines, while countless warriors followed wherever Ghazghkull promised the greatest battle. Armageddon became the symbol of his power. His first great invasion nearly overwhelmed the industrial world before Commissar Yarrick and Imperial reinforcements stopped him. Ghazghkull withdrew, but he did not see the war as a defeat. He had found a planet capable of giving him the conflict he wanted, and an enemy worthy of his attention. When he returned, the invasion was vastly larger. Orc ships filled the system. Armies descended across deserts, jungles, and hive cities. Imperial regiments, titans, and Space Marine chapters were pulled into a war the defenders could not truly finish. Even when the Imperium held its most important positions, enormous Orc armies remained on the surface, and fresh spores ensured the fighting would continue. Then Ghazghkull left again. Not because humanity had broken him, but because Armageddon was only one battlefield. He wanted something greater, a Waaagh capable of swallowing the galaxy. Even death failed to stop him. Ragnar Blackmane decapitated Ghazghkull during their duel, but the warlord's head was recovered and attached to an even larger body. Instead of ending his rise, the battle made him a greater symbol of Orc power. That is what separates Ghazghkull from an ordinary war boss. Killing his soldiers creates more battles, defeating his armies strengthens his legend. Every warlord who submits adds another fleet to his growing horde, while every surviving enemy becomes proof that an even greater war is waiting. The Imperium can defend a world from Ghazghkull. It can destroy his ships, kill millions of his warriors, and force him to abandon a campaign, but it has never destroyed the dream holding his Waaagh together. And if Ghazghkull ever unites enough orcs behind that dream, humanity may not face another invasion of Armageddon. It may face the birth of a new Orc empire. 10,000 years before Ghazghkull threatened Armageddon, another Orc warlord came far closer to destroying the Imperium. Humanity remembers him only as the Great Beast. He rose during a period when Terra believed the greatest age of war was over. The Horus Heresy had become distant history, Imperial institutions had grown complacent, and the High Lords were more concerned with politics than with a greenskin empire forming beyond their attention. Then the attack moons appeared. These were not crude asteroid bases, they were mobile fortresses capable of entering defended systems, carrying enormous armies, advanced weapons, and technology the Imperium had never expected orcs to possess. Worlds fell before reinforcements could arrive. For every fleet humanity destroyed, more greenskin forces appeared. The invasion reached the heart of the Imperium. An attack moon emerged above Terra, placing the throne world beneath an alien weapon while the High Lords argued over how to respond. The Imperial fists were almost annihilated. Navy formations were shattered. Entire armies disappeared in campaigns that proved how badly humanity had underestimated its enemy. The Beast was not merely larger than an ordinary war boss. He ruled a functioning Orc empire. His forces maintained supply systems, coordinated fleets across enormous distances, used diplomats, and deployed technology that rivaled Imperial achievements. The Orcs were not behaving like a temporary Waaagh held together by excitement. They were building a civilization capable of replacing humanity as the dominant power of the galaxy. The Imperium eventually identified Ulanor as the center of that empire, and launched an assault led by Lord Commander Courland and the returned Primarch Vulcan. Humanity assembled one of its greatest armies since the Heresy because smaller attacks had failed. Even that was not enough. The attempt to kill the Beast ended in catastrophe, leaving Imperial forces devastated and forcing humanity to create new methods of warfare, including the kill teams that would become the Death Watch. Black Library describes the Imperium as having been brought to the edge of extinction by the scale and depth of the invasion. The Beast was finally destroyed only after repeated assaults and unimaginable losses. But his greatest legacy was the truth he revealed. Orcs are not permanently primitive. When enough of them unite, their intelligence, technology, and organization rise with their numbers. A greenskin empire can grow until its leaders are no longer raiders attacking Imperial territory. They become rivals for the entire galaxy. The Imperium survived the Great Beast. Had Terra hesitated much longer, there may have been no human empire left for Ghazghkull to threaten. Most Ork warlords measure power by the number of worlds they control. Wazdakka Gutsmek measures it by how quickly he can set those worlds on fire. Known as one of the greatest speed freaks alive, Wazdakka leads his armies from the saddle of an enormous customized warbike called Big Reva. Ork legends claim he almost never dismounts. He simply races from one battlefield to the next, smashing through infantry, vehicles, and defensive lines before the enemy fully understands that an invasion has begun. His Waaagh is built around speed. Warbikers roar ahead of the main force. Crewed aircraft attack command positions. Trucks packed with warriors race through gaps in Imperial defenses, while heavily armed vehicles turn roads, deserts, and factory districts into moving battlefields. A normal Ork invasion can be slowed by fortifications. Wazdakka simply goes around them. He does not need to capture every city or destroy every defensive position. His forces strike supply convoys, communication centers, fuel reserves, and retreating armies. By the time Imperial commanders organize a response, the Speed Waaagh may already be attacking hundreds of kilometers away. That mobility makes him especially dangerous on worlds like Armageddon. The planet is covered with hive cities, industrial zones, polluted wastelands, and enormous distances between Imperial strongholds. A slower army can become trapped in grinding sieges. Wazdakka's forces can race across the open ground, isolate each fortress, and prevent defenders from supporting one another. His arrival marks the beginning of a new and far more dangerous phase of the Armageddon War. Wazdakka led the Ork vanguard, while Ghazghkull's main force gathered behind him, placing already exhausted Imperial armies under pressure before the full Waaagh had even reached the planet. Commissar Yarrick was forced to fight through repeated Speed Waaagh attacks while attempting to reach the last available astropathic choir. His successful breakout allowed Armageddon to send a distress signal, bringing new Imperial forces into the war. Had that message failed, Wazdakka's riders could have cut the planet off before help arrived. This is what makes him more dangerous than a simple biker obsessed with speed. Every kilometer he captures allows more orcs to land. Every supply route he destroys weakens the next Imperial defense. Every victory turns the invasion into a race humanity is already losing. Wazdakka may not possess Ghazghkull's authority or the Great Beast's empire, but he does not need them. He is the spearhead that breaks open a world before the real Waaagh arrives. The Imperium can build walls strong enough to resist millions of orcs, but walls mean very little when the enemy is already behind them. Some Ork warlords want territory, others want glory. Snagrod wanted to prove that even the Imperium's finest warriors could be reduced to a handful of survivors. Known as the Arch-Arsonist of Sheridan, Snagrod built a powerful Ork empire through conquest, intimidation, and the simple promise of more worlds to burn. His growing armies devastated the planet of Badlanding and annihilated the Crimson Fists sent to stop them. With the defenders destroyed, the path toward Rin's world, the chapter's home planet, was left exposed. Rin's world should have been almost impossible to conquer. It was protected by one of the Imperium's most experienced Space Marine chapters, supported by a fortress monastery, planetary defenses, and warriors who had fought orcs for generations. Snagrod understood that a direct assault would be costly, but he also knew that numbers could force the Crimson Fists into a battle they could not escape. His Waaagh descended upon the system. Ork vessels filled the sky, while landing craft carried warriors, artillery, and crude engines toward the surface. Cities were attacked, communications collapsed, and Imperial forces prepared for a long siege. Then disaster struck the defenders before Snagrod's main armies even reached them. A missile launched from the Crimson Fist's own fortress malfunctioned and crashed back into the monastery. The resulting explosion destroyed the stronghold and killed most of the chapter in a single moment. What Snagrod's armies might have needed months to accomplish was achieved by one catastrophic accident. Only a small number of Crimson Fists survived under Chapter Master Pedro Cantor. Snagrod now possessed an opportunity few Ork warlords had ever received. An entire Space Marine homeworld stood before him with its greatest defenders almost completely destroyed. His armies spread across Rinnsworld, overwhelming settlements and forcing the survivors into desperate resistance. The Crimson Fist no longer fought to win a conventional campaign. They fought to avoid extinction. Cantor gathered scattered warriors, defended civilians, and organized attacks against an enemy who believed the war was already over. Small squads operated behind Ork lines. Human survivors were trained to resist. Every destroyed convoy and isolated warband bought the chapter more time. Snagrod had numbers, momentum, and control of most of the battlefield, but he failed to eliminate the last survivors quickly enough. Imperial reinforcements eventually arrived, and the Crimson Fist began reclaiming their world. Snagrod's invasion was broken, but the chapter he attacked would remain permanently scarred. Its fortress was gone, most of its warriors were dead, and Rinnsworld had been devastated. Snagrod did not threaten Terra like the Great Beast. He did something more personal. He almost erased an entire Space Marine chapter from history. And he proved that even the Imperium's strongest defenders can be one accident away from annihilation. Some Ork Warlords become legends because they survive impossible battles. Grukk Face-Rippa became a legend because entire worlds seemed to collapse wherever he appeared. He was brutal even by Ork standards, but strength alone did not make him dangerous. Grukk understood how to turn scattered clans into a single invasion force, and how to keep that force moving from one target to the next. Wherever his Waaaghs advanced, more Orks gathered beneath his banner, attracted by victories that made him appear unstoppable. His greatest campaign struck the Sanctus Reach. The region contained Imperial worlds, fortress systems, and vital routes that humanity believed it could defend. Grukk's armies attacked them as part of one expanding war. Alaric Prime and its sister worlds became the center of a conflict that drew in Imperial Guard regiments, Space Marines, Knights, and countless Ork mobs. Black Library describes Grukk as both cunning and brutal, leading a mighty invasion across the region rather than acting as a simple raider. The danger was not only the number of Orks. Grukk's Waaaghs kept growing because each victory created the next one. Defeated worlds provided weapons, vehicles, fuel, and scrap. Surviving greenskins spread stories of the war boss who could tear enemies apart with his power claw. New tribes joined him because following Grukk promised bigger battles and richer loot. Imperial commanders could slow one attack and still lose another planet. At Obsteria, Grukk's forces even assaulted the Penumbral Spike, the fortress monastery of the Obsidian Glaives. A Space Marine stronghold that had endured for millennia suddenly faced an Ork army powerful enough to threaten the chapter on its own ground. The Imperium eventually understood that destroying Grukk's armies would not be enough. The war boss himself had become the center of the invasion. As long as he lived, defeated clans could regroup, new warbands could arrive, and the Waaaghs could begin again. Imperial leaders were forced to plan direct attempts on his life, including a final assault by the surviving Obsidian Glaives to kill Grukk before their resistance collapsed completely. This is what made Grukk so dangerous. He did not need to reach Terra. He only needed to keep winning until the Sanctus Reach became the foundation of a permanent Ork empire. Every fortress he broke proved that another could fall. Every chapter he weakened made the next world easier to conquer. The Imperium eventually stopped his advance, but only after the war had consumed armies, shattered defenses, and shown how quickly a regional Waaaghs could become a threat to an entire sector. Grukk Face-Rippa was not the greatest Ork warlord in history, but for the worlds of the Sanctus Reach, he was close enough. Most Ork warlords struggled to hold one planet. The Overfiend of Octarius ruled an entire Ork empire. For years, his forces occupied the Octarius system, deep inside territory claimed by the Imperium. His worlds produced endless warriors, weapons, vehicles, and ships, while nearby Imperial colonies lived under the constant threat of raids and invasion. The Imperium could destroy individual warbands, but the empire behind them always created more. Humanity eventually sent a major force to remove him. The Salamanders, Raven Guard, and White Scars entered the Octarius system alongside Astra Militarum troops and unexpected Eldari allies. Each chapter attacked differently. The Raven Guard struck from the shadows. The White Scars used speed to tear apart Ork formations. The Salamanders brought overwhelming firepower against the greenskin strongholds. Yet even 3 Space Marine chapters could not simply erase the Empire. Every conquered position revealed another fortress. Every destroyed factory was surrounded by workshops producing replacement weapons from scrap. The Overfiend did not control a temporary Waagh that would collapse after one defeat. He ruled established worlds filled with orcs who had spent generations fighting, building, and growing stronger. Then the Imperium made the Octarius Empire even more dangerous. Inquisitor Cryptman redirected Hive Fleet Leviathan toward Orc territory, hoping the Tyranids and greenskins would destroy one another. Instead, the Octarius system became the center of an endless war. The Tyranids adapted after every battle. The orcs grew stronger because of every battle. The Overfiend commanded warriors who were becoming larger, more experienced, and more violent with each passing year. Entire planets became breeding grounds for creatures designed only to fight. The longer the conflict continued, the less likely it became that the Imperium could defeat whichever side survived. Eventually, the hive mind changed its strategy. The Swarmlord led the assault against Octaria itself. Rather than wasting organisms against every orc army, it targeted the center holding the empire together. The Overfiend was confronted and killed during the fall of the orc capital. With their ruler dead, rival bosses began fighting for control, while the Tyranids consumed more territory. But his death was not a clean Imperial victory. Humanity had failed to destroy his empire through conventional war. It had instead created a conflict that strengthened both orcs and Tyranids before one enemy finally eliminated the other's leader. The Overfiend nearly brought disaster to the Imperium without ever marching on Terra. He built a power so large that humanity chose to unleash a hive fleet against it. And when the plan succeeded, the surviving Tyranids emerged stronger than before. Most Ork Warlords struggled to hold one planet. The Overfiend of Octarius ruled an entire Orc empire. For years, his forces occupied the Octarius system, deep inside territory claimed by the Imperium. His worlds produced endless warriors, weapons, vehicles, and ships, while nearby Imperial colonies lived under the constant threat of raids and invasion. The Imperium could destroy individual warbands, but the empire behind them always created more. Humanity eventually sent a major force to remove him. The Salamanders, Raven Guard, and White Scars entered the Octarius system alongside Astra Militarum troops and unexpected Eldari allies. Each chapter attacked differently. The Raven Guard struck from the shadows. The White Scars used speed to tear apart orc formations. The Salamanders brought overwhelming firepower against the greenskin strongholds. Yet even 3 Space Marine chapters could not simply erase the Empire. Every conquered position revealed another fortress. Every destroyed factory was surrounded by workshops producing replacement weapons from scrap. The Overfiend did not control a temporary Waagh that would collapse after one defeat. He ruled established worlds filled with orcs who had spent generations fighting, building, and growing stronger. Then the Imperium made the Octarius Empire even more dangerous. Inquisitor Cryptman redirected Hive Fleet Leviathan toward Orc territory, hoping the Tyranids and greenskins would destroy one another. Instead, the Octarius system became the center of an endless war. The Tyranids adapted after every battle. The orcs grew stronger because of every battle. The Overfiend commanded warriors who were becoming larger, more experienced, and more violent with each passing year. Entire planets became breeding grounds for creatures designed only to fight. The longer the conflict continued, the less likely it became that the Imperium could defeat whichever side survived. Eventually, the hive mind changed its strategy. The Swarmlord led the assault against Octaria itself. Rather than wasting organisms against every orc army, it targeted the center holding the empire together. The Overfiend was confronted and killed during the fall of the orc capital. With their ruler dead, rival bosses began fighting for control, while the Tyranids consumed more territory. But his death was not a clean Imperial victory. Humanity had failed to destroy his empire through conventional war. It had instead created a conflict that strengthened both orcs and Tyranids before one enemy finally eliminated the other's leader. The Overfiend nearly brought disaster to the Imperium without ever marching on Terra. He built a power so large that humanity chose to unleash a hive fleet against it. And when the plan succeeded, the surviving Tyranids emerged stronger than before. Before the Great Beast placed an attack moon above Terra, another Ork overlord built an empire so powerful that the Emperor himself went to war against it. His name was Urlakk Urg. Ulanor was not an isolated greenskin world. It was the center of a vast orc power spreading across multiple systems near the end of the Great Crusade. By that point, humanity had defeated countless alien civilizations, and the Emperor's armies seemed unstoppable. Yet the Ulanor Empire had grown large enough to become one of the final great obstacles standing between the Imperium and control of the galaxy. Urlakk commanded more than a collection of rival tribes. His warriors occupied fortified worlds, supported enormous armies, and resisted forces that had already conquered much of human space. Every victory attracted more orcs, while every captured world provided new weapons, ships, and factories. If the Empire had been allowed to continue expanding, it could have grown into a Waagh, capable of tearing apart the still formium before humanity had secured its borders. The Emperor refused to leave the campaign to ordinary commanders. Imperial forces launched the Ulanor Crusade as a massive assault against Urlakk's empire. Horus led the decisive strike, while other legions attacked across the surrounding systems, preventing the orcs from concentrating all of their strength around their capital. The final battle became one of the greatest victories of the Great Crusade, and the last major campaign in which the Emperor personally led his armies. The fighting reached the heart of Ulanor. Imperial troops broke through the orc defenses, while Horus and the Emperor confronted the enemy leadership. Urlakk Urg was killed, and with his death, the power holding the empire together collapsed. Imperial history later remembered the victory as so important, power holding the empire together collapsed. Imperial history later elevated Horus to War Master during the triumph of Ulanor. To humanity, Ulanor looked like proof that no alien empire could resist the Great Crusade. History proved otherwise. The same world would later become the center of another massive orc civilization during the War of the Beast. The Imperium had killed Urlakk and shattered his armies, but it had not removed whatever made Ulanor capable of producing greenskin empires on a galactic scale. Urlakk Urg never reached Terra. He did something almost as dangerous. He forced the Emperor to gather overwhelming power against a single orc empire, and his defeat became the victory that convinced humanity its conquest of the galaxy was nearly complete. Had Urlakk survived Ulanor, the Great Crusade might have ended there, and the Imperium could have been broken before Horus ever had the chance to betray it.